We thank you, Father God, that your love is like an anchor that holds us secure. And we are so grateful for that this morning. And just as we gather here, we celebrate your love and your goodness. And we pray for your presence to be with us in everything that's said in these coming moments. In Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thank you, Chris and the band, for leading us in those great songs. That was great. And Bev as well for leading us earlier, leading us in this meeting. And it's great to have Anthony and Angie, our family's pastors, here with me on stage. They're socially distanced, of course. And as many of you know, Anthony and Angie Parkinson have become our family's pastors during the last while, during lockdown. What such a strange way of starting a new job in a new church. But I just thought it'd be great if we heard their stories. And so we're going to hear Anthony's story today and Angie's story next Sunday. But of course, they're very much interwoven. So I'm sure Angie will be chipping in every so often on this. But just to begin with, Anthony, you have something in common with my two daughters, because my two daughters were brought up by two teachers. And you have a mother as a teacher, and your dad was a head teacher. So just to kick off, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, and was it a happy childhood?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm from good stock, really. My parents, as you said, were both teachers. My brother and I had a good upbringing. We enjoyed holidays. We lived in a nice area. We went to good schools. And life was good. I'm not from a family of believers, a family of Christians. I did attend Sunday school as a kid. But I guess for me, I had really the world at my feet. I had everything going for me. And I just made some bad choices on my way. I don't think I was an inherently bad person. I just think that I guess I saw in many ways some of the lies of the enemy, and I bought into them. So when I was, I'd say 14, 15 years old, I got into drugs. I'd already been smoking and drinking and messing around with my mates. It seemed like a very appealing, enticing life, but I just I think no one put a gun to my head. No one forced me to do it. I saw perhaps a way of filling the void in my heart that, of course, I now know should be filled with God. Interestingly enough, actually, Angie and I went to school together, didn't we?
We did, yeah. Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So you've known each other a long time. Yeah,
very long time. So we were just friends at school, good friends. Angie from the good Christian family and was a good Christian girl, and I was a bit of a rebel, setting fire to gas taps and things like that.
Just chip in a bit there?
Yeah, absolutely.
During those teenage years, would you say you fell in with the wrong crowd or what?
Yeah, I mean, yes. All my mates were using, and we were all doing the same sort of thing. We were into nicking cars and messing around. But like I said earlier, I think there's a problem because it's too easy for people just to say, well, it's, I fell into a bad crowd. Actually, I have to take responsibility for my own actions. I know that as a Christian, but back then, like I said, no one forced me, no one coerced me or pressured me to take drugs or do some of the silly things that I did. I wanted to do it because it seemed exciting to me.
So you've never played the victim, you've never blamed other people, you've always recognised your own...
Oh, I probably have.
You probably have.
I probably have, but I think I've come to a point where I've realised that I just can't do that. That's just not I'm not the victim. I have my own choices. I have my own free will. I have my own right mind, and I'm able to make decisions. Absolutely.
Yeah. So during your teenage years, you started taking drugs, started taking cannabis, recreational drugs, but it went downhill from there, as so happens with drug taking. Is that how it was?
Absolutely. So, as you say, I started on the softer drugs. Dare I use that word? I then got involved heavily in the early 90s, early to mid 90s in the UK rave scene. Everything that went with that, all the dance drugs, the party and lifestyle. I also sold drugs. I sold drugs. In fact, at one point, I stopped working. I was working, and I stopped working because it wasn't economically viable for me. I was making far too much money selling drugs. So I packed my job in just to sell drugs full-time rather than part-time.
Wow. Yeah. So selling drugs was a way of, but you were still studying them, weren't you?
Yeah. Ironically enough, I did A-levels. I went to uni. It was around the time I went to uni that things really started to go wrong. At that time, my friends and I had experimented with heroin, with crack cocaine, and I guess it was then my life really started to fall apart. Ironically enough, I managed to get through uni, even with a habit. But I came out the other side a complete mess, a complete wreck. And when I returned from uni, basically, instead of getting a job, I just became a full-time addict, really.
Right. So you'd gone from, initially it was recreational, but by this time it was a habit. You were addicted. And your brother as well?
Yeah, both my brother and I, all of our friends, our whole group, really, we were all doing it. So there was no real escape. In fact, actually at one point I tried to run away. I'd lived in France while I was at uni and studied there, and I went back there for a while, only to return 6 months later because the company I was working for went bust. So I saw that as a means just to return home and get wasted again, basically.
Were your parents aware of all of this? They must have become aware of it at some point.
They were, because unfortunately I had some drug convictions. I was arrested when I was 16 for possession of drugs. I was arrested then when I was 18 for possession with intent to supply. So obviously at that, the police had to come to my house. My brother equally, getting in trouble for thefts and stuff. And eventually, sadly, the police became pretty frequent visitors at my house because I got a record, and I was burgling a lot of houses to fund my habit. Unfortunately, something I'm really not proud of at all.
So something changed there, because initially you were making money out of it all, and then you came to be burgling houses. Well, obviously there was something had changed.
Yeah. So I think once I got caught for possession with intent, I realized I had to stop selling. And ironically, all that fell in with me going to uni and actually getting into the harder drugs as well. It was always the softer drugs that I sold. So, yeah, and I worked. I held a job down for a while, so in many ways I paid for my habit. But then, unfortunately, I had a serious relationship, and that ended, and my fiance didn't know I was a user. So when that ended, I had nothing and no one really to hide it from anymore. So I started injecting drugs at that point, and that's when life became super difficult for me, let's say.
During all this time, though, did you I'm trying to get my head around the sense of this is wrong, or this is dangerous, and this is going to have some bad consequences in my life, and you were having those bad consequences. How did you feel about that?
I for a long time thought I wasn't going to make it out.
Yeah.
I remember I was on the streets of Nottingham. I was selling the Big Issue. It's a homeless magazine. I sold that for a while to try and fund my habit when I couldn't steal anymore and I had no more money. So I sold the Big Issue, and I was stood on my pitch one day, and I remember looking up at the sky and saying, God, if you're real, is this it? Is this my lot? Am I just going to die a junkie on these streets? And that's really what I expected. It's ironic, of course, because I didn't have any faith at the time, but how easily and readily we turn to God when we're in trouble in our lives.
That sounds a bit like a prodigal son moment when the prodigal son was there feeding the pigs and thinking, "Is this it? Would that be what you'd felt it was like?"
Absolutely. I've long realised that story is my story.
Yeah.
You know, my story is the story of the prodigal son, the father just wanting me to return home, and me kicking and screaming against that, but eventually realising that I needed to come home, and what a wonderful place to come to.
But I guess it wasn't quite as simple as that. Just coming home, you got an addiction, and you got a criminal record, and there was you were telling us the other day about a situation where you had a solicitor who
Yeah.
did pretty well for you.
Yeah, he did. He got me out of a lot of trouble. I won't mention his name, but he's a very well-renowned solicitor, or was in those days a very well-renowned solicitor in Nottingham, probably the best, or certainly was thought of to be the best. And man, he got me out of a lot of trouble. But I remember the last time I was in custody, I got caught burgling a police officer's house, basically. I mean, you know, how ironic, how epic.
Not a good move.
On a Sunday afternoon of all, I got caught burgling this copper's house. And my solicitor sat there with me at Nottingham Bridewell. That's the main police station underneath the courts. And he said, do you even want me to ask for bail? You know, you're not going to get it. And I said, well, you may as well. I know I'm going down. And I didn't. He got bail for me. And of course now it's very easy for me to look at that and realise that God had something in mind. He had an intention. He'd covered me. He'd protected me even then. And I was just oblivious to it all.
Mm. So you've never actually been to jail somehow?
No, fortunately, I've spent many weekends in custody, right. But I've been delivered from that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very fortunate. All my friends really have spent time in jail, so I'm pretty blessed in that.
Yeah, but, I mean, your mum and dad at that point, knowing all that, they must have been pretty devastated, thinking, "What have we done wrong here?"
Yeah, that was their great question. Their great sorrow. What have we done to deserve this? Where did we go wrong? And actually, even in our addiction, my brother and I would say, "Well, you haven't done anything. You know, we're the product of our own poor choices, really." But that weighed on them for many, many years. And then my brother got clean, and he was able to see some reconciliation.
Yeah.
And then equally I went to rehab.
Yeah.
And I was able to see great reconciliation on that as well. There's quite an ironic story about my going to rehab, though, which I think we should tell at this point. So Angie and I went to school together, and our lives would intersect at seemingly pivotal moments. And it was December 2004. It was actually quite a bright day, particularly for December, I remember. And I was going to buy Big Issue magazines in Nottingham city centre from their office, which was just on the outskirts. And I want to hand over to Angie because she's going to tell quite an interesting part of this story.
Thank you. So next to the office where they sold the big issue, there was a shop that I worked in. Now, I had no idea at this point the state that Anthony was in, and that he'd even been around in that area as often and as frequently as he had to get the big issue. But there was this one particular day that I'd been over to the garage. I was on my break, and Anthony was crossing over the road at the same time, and we kind of met in the middle, didn't we, at the what do you call it, the island in the middle of the road, and we were glad to see each other. Anthony was obviously heading off to score, to get what he needed at that point. And we stopped briefly and we spoke, and he asked me if I'd got any cigarettes, which I did have, so I gave you some cigarettes, didn't I? And he asked me if I'd got any money, so I gave him a $5. And he looked at me and he said, "You'll get this back in heaven." And he then said, "You will, next time you see me, I will be clean." And that was the last I saw of you for quite a while, wasn't it? I mean, like you said earlier, our paths had kept crossing. But from that moment, I was very curious as to where he'd disappeared from. I'd seen him on his pitch selling the big issue, so I knew where to spot him, and he wasn't there. After a short while, I couldn't see him anymore, but I had no idea where you were, had I? So, that was quite ironic, really, just those two statements in that conversation, and then I'll let Anthony tell you where it went from there.
Yeah.
Yes, so about 3 weeks after that conversation, I went to a Christian rehab. And interestingly enough, about 3 weeks after that, Angie went back to church, didn't you?
Yeah, it coincided. So we met together on this one day, and then it was literally 3 weeks after that Anthony went to rehab, and I went back to church and started doing the Alpha course. So it was literally the same time, wasn't it?
But you going to rehab, was that part of condition of? Was that a free choice? Or how did that happen? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was. It was slightly complicated because I was on probation. At the time, I was going through the Crown Court because I'd breached my probation because of my drug use. And so I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything. And I went to see my probation officer and said, I've got to get out of here, I've got to go to rehab. And she said, well, you can't. You can't do anything. So I was like, look, please, can you try and help me? I've got a place I can go to as soon as tomorrow. I can ring them and they'll take me. It's a Christian place. I'll have to do an unmedicated detox. It'll be a bit uncomfortable, but I've done it loads of times before, so I just want to crack on with it. And she said to me, I'm owed a favour by someone high up at the court. I'm going to call it in for you. So she rang whoever it was, and this person basically worked it out so that I was allowed to go to rehab before I actually attended court. And which was, that was absolutely amazing, because I was definitely, that time I was definitely headed for a custodial sentence because obviously I'd breached previous conditions. And of course, once I got to rehab and got on with it, when I eventually went to court, they, 6 or so weeks after I'd been in rehab, they saw the change in me. So they said, well, it's pointless us sending you to jail when something's clearly happening in your life. So at that point, they then made an order that I had to stay there.
Right. Yeah.
But it was great because it was at that point not only what I needed, it was what I wanted. I genuinely wanted to change my life. I flitted backwards and forwards with the idea of rehab. I knew I needed change. I just didn't think it was possible. My brother and I had resigned ourselves to that fact, and then one day he just up and went and sorted himself out. And it took me, I guess, about a year, 18 months longer to make that same decision.
Obviously, there was a very quick change in that 6 weeks. And this was at Bethel, wasn't it? This was your introduction to...
Yeah, it was at Bethel UK, that's right, yes.
Yeah.
So
what happened in those early stages? Tell us about that very first period of time there.
Oh, man. Wow. So I went to Bethel UK, which is a Christian rehab community, an absolutely tremendous place. Deeply indebted to them, and I went there. I didn't want to be a Christian. I didn't want to join the God Squad at all. I had this plan in my mind. The addict's holy trinity. I'm going to go, I'm going to do my 6 months or so, and then I'm going to get a job, a girlfriend, and a flat. Then my life will be sorted. Maybe a car, if I pass my driving test as well. But when I got there, I was really confronted by what can only be described as the book of Acts in glorious technicolor. So I saw people, scars and tattoos and, bits of their body missing but they were just so filled with joy, and they cared for me. And even when I didn't want to be cared for, even when I made it very hard to be cared for, they loved me, and they just expressed what I now know to be something of the divine. And I would ask them, like, what's this about? Why do you? I've got nothing to give you other than my bad attitude. What's this about? And it always the same thing. Jesus can change your life. And I realized that these guys and girls were exactly the same as me. They'd come from the same place. Their stories and circumstances varied slightly. Many of them had done years and years in jail, some of them for very, very serious stuff. And yet they weren't bad people. They weren't bad people. They just made some terrible choices. But I was given a Bible to read, and I began to read it, thinking I'd disprove it. I was like some great academic mind, and I was going to disprove the Bible. That was quite funny as well. But I saw stories of just ordinary people who, on a general note, tended to make quite a mess of things. And yet, when God asked them to do stuff, they did extraordinary things for him. And so it was like looking in a mirror, really. So I'd look at the book, and then I'd look up around me, and I'd be like, oh my gosh. And then it dawned on me, like, it's real. It's real. It's really, really real. And so I thought, okay. So then I did the great great Moses intercession. I bargained with God. You should never try that. Don't bargain with God. But I did. I said, okay, God, okay, right, it's you and me. If you're real, I'll give you my life, and I'll give you some time, and I'll stay here, and I'll do this. But I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be an addict. But of course, it was typical addict mindset. I was still all ifs and buts. But I accepted the Lord. I accepted the Lord Jesus as my Savior and my King. And I moved on from there. And my life began to dramatically change. The Bethel community is quite special because it lives under what can only be described as an accelerated grace. It's like a greenhouse almost, a spiritual greenhouse. And yeah, it was incredible for me. It was incredible for my life transformation. It was incredible for my spiritual growth. And it wasn't too much longer that I realized I was being called there. that God wanted me to stay and do something and give something back. I'd probably only been a Christian about 4 or 5 months at this point. And, or should I say, in Bethel 4 or 5 months, so not that long at all. But I was only too happy to do that. I had nothing. I had nothing to lose by staying. I had nothing to gain by leaving. I'd blown it all, my uni degrees and any money I'd had, anything really. I just destroyed it, just like the prodigal son. I was living with the pigs, and now I'm living with kings, living the dream basically. So it was easy. It was an easy decision for me to make. I stayed there for a couple of years. By then I was a leader. I was running businesses for them, running a house, seeing my life change.
So running a house, that's other addicts there, going through the process you've gone through, and you're leading them.
Absolutely. So I was caring for a house of like 15, 20 guys, giving pastoral care, ministry, supporting their basic practical needs, and they were my responsibility. I had pastoral oversight, so if there were really deep spiritual issues, because obviously I was still a pretty new Christian, we would go to our pastoral oversight and they would support us. But generally, on a day-to-day basis, I was responsible for pretty much everything they needed. Living with them in a house, sleeping in dorms, in bunk beds. So it was inescapable, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then, I'd been there a couple of years, and I put my testimony on what was then the Facebook of the day. It was called Friends Reunited.
I remember Friends Reunited.
I looked at my school year, and there were loads of people on there, and I didn't contact anybody. I just thought, I'm going to put my story on there, see if it impacts someone. So I did.
You weren't supposed to put anything on it.
No, I was naughty. I might get, if anyone from Bethel was watching, I might get in real trouble for that. Sorry. Not sorry. I put my story on there, and within a few days, I had a lovely letter from a lovely young lady that is now sat next to me as my wife. And you got to tell the bit about Guy and what happened at Trent.
Okay, so like I said earlier, I'd gone back to Trent Vineyard in Nottingham and done the Alpha course and started
Trent
building.
Vineyard, that's a church in Nottingham.
It's a church in Nottingham, and I had at this point started building my own relationship with Jesus, and I won't go too much into that because that will tarnish next week. So you'll know it all, so I won't say too much. But there was one Sunday evening that a gentleman called Guy Chevreau came to Trent Vineyard to talk about a book that he had written about Bethel UK. I hadn't heard of Bethel before this point. And I bought the book and I read it within 3 days, and it was sat on the computer at home at the time. Myself and my daughter lived with my mum, and while I was reading it, I just kept saying to my mum and to my friend Louise, I just kept saying, this is where I need to be, this is where I want to go, this is where God's going to turn my past round and put all the bits and bobs and use it for good. And so it was the Wednesday, and the book, like I say, was sat next to the computer, and I switched the computer on, and this alert came up to say that somebody had put up, changed their profile on Friends United, and it was Anthony, and he'd put this statement on saying how he had come to Bethel and he had come to know the Lord in a big way, and that he was now running the house in this place that I had been absolutely captivated by for the last 3 days.
Amazing.
So I wrote to him.
Yeah.
And I did what every young Christian man should do at that point, and ignored her. I read the letter. I thought, I must get back to her, and I put it down, and I didn't respond. And a shame on me. But you've got to see even in that the Lord has his way and purpose. As awful as that must have been, it certainly dealt with any rejection issues that Angie might have with me before we'd even got together. So that was awesome. But in all seriousness, I put this letter down, and it ended up in my wardrobe. And about 6 months later, I'm going home to see my family for a weekend. And before I was leaving, I had to go and see my pastors, the seniors, the leaders on site.
Can I just add that during that 6 months, I emailed, and I'd already written a letter, and I tried to call, and I emailed the shop where he was working, and still got no response.
Oh.
I didn't know about all of that, but it was hidden from me. Yeah. More about that later, or another time. But so I was going to see my leaders and just a bit of a debrief before I went away for a few days, and I was clearing out my wardrobe. So I thought I'll sort it out before I pack my stuff and go. And I pulled out this letter, and I was like, oh no, that I'm so bad. She's an old friend of mine, and I've done nothing about it. So I go over to my pastor's house because they live on site as well. That's the model in Bethel. All the senior leaders live among the men, just as we did when we were leaders in Manchester. And so I go over to their house, brandishing this letter. And I said to them, I didn't show them. I just said, my old school friend wrote me this letter about 6 months ago, and shamefully I ignored her. Can I have your permission just to call her and meet her? And she's really interested in Bethel, and she's heard Guy speak and read the book, and she's fascinated by what we do. Perhaps I could invite her to come. And they, I sat down, and they said, yeah, of course you can, but be careful to let us know when it develops anything more than platonic. I was like, no. She's my school friend. She's like an old mate I used to sit on the bus with on the way home and set fire to the gas taps with in science. She's a mate. No, it's not like that. I've not seen her for like however many years. Anyway, I went home, and she'd put her phone number on this letter, so I rang her house, and interestingly enough, she answered, and you had no reason to be there, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So weekends used to be quite busy. I was a single mum at the time, and I'd got my daughter into all sorts of gymnastics and dancing, so I wouldn't normally have been around, but it just so happened that weekend things weren't quite normal, and I was at home for the whole weekend. So I guess you could say that was God orchestrated as well, couldn't you, really?
Yeah, so I called her, and again I did what like every noble young man should do. Hey, hello, Angela, do you know who this is? She's like, no. Have you any idea? I said, it's Anthony. I'm back in Nottingham for a couple of days. Would you like to meet? We could talk about Bethel. And she said, of course, yeah, I'd love to. So we arranged to meet the next day, and I turned up to our meeting with my mum.
With your mum?
With my mum. So there is an explanation. It was my mum's birthday, and so I'd promised when I came home I'd go shopping with her, and we'd go out. But I was kind of petrified. I'm sort of newly Christian, and the whole relationship thing was a different dynamic for me. And also Bethel has kind of set policies and rules about that type of thing. So I said, Mum, you're going to have to come with me. I know I'm going to meet in a public place, but you're going to have to come with me. Well, my mum did come with me, and I think she very quickly saw the way we both looked at one another and then just abandoned us and said, right, I'll see you later. Call me when you're done. And I'm sat there like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I could be in real trouble here. But we had a great time. And I said, you should come. You should come and see Battelle. You should come to church on one Friday evening and just see what we do and meet everyone and, see if, how that sort of, how you're fixed for that, what it says to you. So you did.
Yeah, and I think at this point as well, just to point out that we were still under the illusion that everything was still quite platonic.
Yeah.
Both of us.
Yeah. But that was an illusion.
It was an illusion, and
God had other ideas.
yeah, and so I went back. I went back, and I remember meeting with my pastor the first time, and I think we were speaking to a guy. We were ministering to one of my guys, and we finished with him and sent him on his way, and it was just me and my pastor. So, Anne, how was your weekend? And I was like, yeah, it was so great, and it was great to see my family, and it went really well. And then I just kind of hung my head and I said, Kent, she's so lovely. She's like way out of my league. It's just never going to happen. And he just laughed and he said, is she going to come and see us? And I was like, yeah, she's going to come on such and such a Friday. And he said, well, great, we'll meet. So, yeah, so what I should say at this point, I've missed an really important piece of information. Mm-hmm. So, about a month, perhaps a couple of months at most, before I went to meet Angie in Nottingham, and I called her, this guy came over, a minister came over from the States, who has a really keen prophetic ministry. I suppose the closest thing in New Testament times to the office of prophet, the Old Testament prophet. He really is a thus saith the Lord. He really is. And it tends to happen. And so he came over. It was the first time he'd been. He was a really good friend of our senior leaders, but he'd not been. He's really busy. He travels all over the world. And he came and he did his thing, which is to prophesy over people individually. And out of 350 people, he picked me out on one Saturday night. He was there and he stood me up and he gave me some great words, some very affirming words, things that have come true in my life. And then just as I was sitting down, he said, oh, by the way, son, you're single, aren't you? Well, you better get ready because you're going to get married. I hear wedding bells, wedding bells, wedding bells. And of course, if anyone knows Battelle or has been to Battelle, they'll know that, ironically, for a church, it's male-dominated. The vast majority of the population of the church is male, unlike every other church you'll ever go to.
Yeah,
and
or it's the other way around.
And yeah, exactly. and so, of course, all my mates then come to me and, you definitely got that wrong. That was my word. And I'm just kind of sat there all smug, arms folded. No, I'm having that one. I'm good with that. I want a wife. And so Angie came. Yeah. She came and she didn't know anything. In fact, I told her on the eve of our wedding. No, that's not true. Sorry. It was a week before I told her. And I'd also forbidden all my friends. I'd forbidden the leaders of the girls' house where she stayed. I'd said, you cannot tell her. She's got to make her own decision about Battelle and call him for herself. And I said, I'll tell her that. Because they were all saying, we should tell her about this. And I was like, no. I don't want to coerce her. She's got to figure it out. But, so that happened. And my pastors, they said, this is going to, when she came, they said, she's really cute. This is going to be really interesting to see how it works out, considering the words you got. Why don't you tell your bit about starting coming and moving in and...
Okay, so just very briefly, because again, I don't want to say too much to take away from next week. But shortly after meeting Anthony on that Saturday, I started going to Birmingham to the church on a Friday evening. They had 2 meetings, one on a Friday evening and one on a Sunday morning. So it started off just Friday evenings. And then I would come on a Friday evening and a Sunday morning, and very quickly I started staying in the women's house with my daughter Bethany for weekends and spending more and more time there.
Yeah, and eventually they moved in, and we, of course, by this time we were dating, and after, I don't know, about a year and a bit, we were married.
I will just add there as well that when I moved to Birmingham with Bethany and left Nottingham behind and everything that I knew, 3 weeks after moving to Birmingham, Anthony moved back to Derby.
Yeah, so they'd asked me to take up some pretty senior responsibilities to really sort of understudy the pastors there and support them. Derby was going through a transition. The Derby work was going through a transitional stage at the time, and so they wanted some key business support and pastoral support for the senior leaders there. So, and I was the man apparently. So off I trotted.
Yeah. So we'll hear maybe more about the wedding next week. We'll leave that till next. So you're married, and you're then joint leaders. Yeah. How did?
Yes. So I thought what would probably happen is, because she was new to Batel, that we'd sort of step out of leadership for a while and just serve and get to know each other. Yeah, absolutely. But that wasn't the case, and we were joint leaders. We were serving under the main leaders in Derby. We had responsibility for the men, the houses, the businesses, and it was great. And we'd been there for probably about a bit less than 2 years. It was about 2 years, and we went to a very well-known Christian conference, and we just both sensed, Angie particularly, but myself also, sensed the Lord say, I just want you to hold your hands out for me and be prepared to go. And we thought it was to perhaps give some relief to we thought we might have a bit of a ministry of traveling around the various Batel works and, supporting the main leaders, but allowing them to sort of find some rest. We thought it was perhaps that. And when we went to our senior leaders with it, they said, well, we've been trying to get to Manchester for years, don't you? Why don't you consider that? We're not saying it's you. They'd asked lots of people if they wanted to go, and nobody wanted to go. So they said, look, you've come to us. You're the first people that have actually come to us saying we're ready to do something. We don't know what it is. Will you consider Manchester?
Great place to go to, and to pioneer a work there.
To begin to plant basically a Batel centre and a church there.
Yeah.
So we basically were like, oh man, we've got Bethany. We just had Joshua, and so we were like, right, well that's a big issue. So we felt, rather than ask the Lord why we should go, we started to ask him, okay, God, just let's do this differently. Tell us why we shouldn't go. And he just shut down every single reason: kids, schools, our own fears, our families. And in the end, we sort of ran back to them and said, it's us, we're meant to go, send us, we want to go. And they were like, well, okay, calm down, let's see. But sure enough, they came back to us pretty quickly and said, yeah, it's you're going to go. And so in March 2010, we upped sticks and moved to Manchester. Well, we moved to Wigan first to plan the Batel work there.
Right. And I guess we could do the same amount of time all over. There's the last 10 years at Manchester is another story, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Which we probably haven't got time to tell this morning.
No, we don't.
So you planted that work in Manchester.
Yep.
And you pioneered a church there with guys. And now you're here. I guess we just need to maybe, in a nutshell, now move from there to now and tell that story another time.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, we founded the work and developed it from scratch, set up the businesses, the church, the men's house, took on the single largest construction project that Battelle UK had ever undergone at that point, remodeling this old university sports ground to be used, as a residence for our members. So we took it over and we began to redevelop it with what we had. And it was amazing. It was an amazing journey. We loved our time there. God really dealt with us. He really spoke to us and shaped us and honed and I suppose thrust us into pastoral ministry, or thrust it upon us really, and we loved it. We really loved it, and I think we, short of the Lord speaking to us about anything different, we'd probably found our vocation for life. Really, we loved the men. We were like one big extended family, but the Lord last year, probably about this time, really began to speak to both of us about just change. Angie had a couple of very profound dreams, like really profound dreams. I had a couple of quite profound words from Scripture, and we sensed that it was time for change, so we submitted ourselves to our leaders, and they said, well, maybe it's time to do something different with us. And we prayed about that, and we felt that actually, no, it was time to up sticks and go do something else. Yeah. And we had no idea what that was. Right. Absolutely no idea. We thought that we were meant to stay in Manchester, but it quite quickly became obvious, for some reason, and I still don't know to date why it was. The Lord, well, I do now, obviously, but the Lord had put Preston on my heart. And I was like, honestly, I can say, I was like, God, why do I want to go to Preston? Like, I've got family from there and around there, do you know, like Philip says of Jesus, doesn't he? He says, "Was anything good come from Nazareth?" I'm sorry, guys. No, I'm sorry. I have to be honest. And I was like, "Is there anything good in Preston, Lord? I don't know." But it was there. It was like, of
course, we're South Ribble.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. But I couldn't get away from it. I just couldn't get away from it. And then I saw your ad, and we had our little conversation.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And
so we were going through this similar process last year, and over the last few years, knowing that we needed to bring new pastors into the church, and it was all changed for us. And we changed our name to New Day Church, a fresh start, a secure future. Not just about the church, but about people's lives, which is the story of your lives. And we had this phone call, and then we went and visited.
That's
all
right.
Our leaders went
us.
to Battelle. I mean, for me, that was a very profound moment. Seeing you guys, seeing all the guys in Battelle, and seeing the transformation of their lives, talking to some of the guys, the reality of it was powerful. And it did my heart good. And I thought, these guys have pioneered this work here. I want them with us. That's what I felt.
Yeah. And I think for us, the same, meeting you guys and coming here, there was an excitement for us, and yes, I did find there was something good in Preston. There we go. There's my little my little moment of redemption there. We did find that, but I've got to say, and this is how we see the Lord work, because actually for our family particularly, there are things that I've held and had in my heart, Angie too, for many years, and we're now actually seeing them fulfilled. Dreams for our children, our family, and I'd resigned. I was like, Lord, they're there. I'll sacrifice them to you quite happily. As long as we've got you and we can serve you, we're happy, we're content. But we're seeing so many good things that even in this bizarre time, this lockdown where we've not really been able to meet people and fellowship with people, God's spoken so clearly and profoundly, like that we don't know what's ahead, but we do know it is right. The Lord has brought us here. He's brought us to his house to do something. We genuinely don't know what that is, but we're super excited because we're seeing his hallmarks in almost everything we do.
Fantastic. I'm going to call the band up now, and while the band are coming back to take the places to sing, I'm just going to pray, and then we'll just continue with some worship. That's fantastic. To be continued next week. We've got more. We'll swap you over, and you'll swap seats, and we'll hear Angie's story, and maybe just fill out some of the little details there a bit more. But I just want to pray. Father God, we thank you for the way that you change people's lives, and we thank you for what you did in Anthony's life and Angie's life, bringing them together, delivering them from a past that was going nowhere and that was just leading them into a terrible place. And we thank you for the way you've led them since into a whole new place. And we thank you for bringing them here into our church. And we're excited for the future because we see your hand on their lives from in the past. And we know you don't abandon your people. You don't abandon those you've called. You take them to new places. And you're going to take us with them into new places. And it's going to be good. Thank you, Lord. Amen. Amen. Great. Over to Chris and the band.
Okay. So we're going to have an extended time of worship now. We're going to start with It's a New Day. So we've probably sung this a couple of times while we've been on lockdown, kind of following the Edge Church as they did it. But it really kind of resonates for us with our church name, and really thinking of Anthony's testimony as well. It's a new day that God gives all of us. This is the day the Lord has made. It's a new day. It's a new day. I will rejoice. I will be glad. It's a new day. It's a new day. I'm letting go of all I've known. I'm holding on to you. I'm laying down all of my crowns. Lord, come and make me new. Your mercies are new every morning. Your faithfulness shines like the sun. Your goodness surrounds me forever. Your presence is more than enough. Your word makes a way in the desert. Your spirit restores and renews. Your love and your grace never fail me. You're making everything new. You're making everything new. This is the day the Lord has made. It's a new day. It's a new day. I will rejoice. I will be glad. It's a new day. It's a new day. I'm letting go of all I've known. I'm holding on to you. your eyes, lift your eyes and see. Behold, I do a new thing. Lift your voice and sing. Behold, I do a new thing. Lift your eyes and see. Behold, I do a new thing. Lift your voice and sing. Behold, I do a new thing. Mercies on you every morning. Your faithfulness shines like the sun. Your goodness surrounds me forever. Your presence is more than enough. Your word makes a way in the desert. Your spirit restores and renews. Your love and your grace never fail me. You're making everything new. Jesus, you're making everything new. It's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new day, says the Lord. It's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new day, says the Lord. Mercies on you every morning. Your faithfulness shines like the sun. Your goodness surrounds me forever. Your presence is more than enough. Your word makes a way in the desert. Your spirit restores and renews. Your love and your grace never fail me. You're making everything new. You're making everything new. You're making everything new.
And haven't we heard a fantastic story today of what God can do in an individual's life? And that can change not just his life, but his family's life. And now he's going to be involved in changing our lives too, as he pastors alongside Angie and, of course, Graham. And so I was just thinking, a fresh start. Do you want a fresh start today? Do you want a fresh start? No matter what your life looks like, you can have a fresh start. And nobody is beyond God and his love and his reach. And so if you want a fresh start, you can get rid of the stain of your sin. You can get rid of that by inviting Jesus into your life, to transform your life, to bring hope to your life. And so I'm just going to pray now. And if this is for you, if you want a fresh start today, then invite Jesus into your life to forgive your sin and to give you the hope of heaven and a journey with him. So pray along with me if you want that fresh start and a secure future. Lord Jesus, thank you for dying for me. Please forgive me for my sin. Please come into my life today. I want to journey the rest of my life with you. Please come and fill me with your Holy Spirit, that my life will be transformed. and that I would have eternal life and security with you. And connect me with a church that I can belong to, that can look after me. Thank you. Thank you for this new start. Amen. So thank you for joining us today. It's been a real joy and privilege and pleasure to have you with us. And I pray for God's blessing to be on you today. And as he blesses you, may you be a blessing to others. Amen. Join us next week to hear the next part of the story. God bless you. Bye for now.